Well, I think the importance is to realize that, we don't necessarily, I mean, even though this is a very solitary occupation, it's important not to be completely alone. Otherwise, your work suffers. And I think if you're a young writer, especially if you're coming out of one of these programs, like not just my program in MA, but you go to someplace like the Iowa Writers Workshop and you do the 2 years of MFA there or whatever, and you come out with a manuscript or whatever, but it can't sell or who knows what, then you're living, like I am, across the country without, and very far away from the institution where I had my teachers, or any kind of community I developed there. You begin to wonder, well, how am I going to support this work? Who's going to put any kind of like pressure on this draft, or who can I talk about ideas with? So you have to find something, and it's a way of also, because I think, I don't know what the right period is for everyone. I know that I still, in a lot of ways, feel like an apprentice. I always want to put myself in a humbling place where I always feel like I have more to learn, and I'm always seeking out what others can teach me. That's why I said that reading is so important. That's your first teacher. The second teacher is, well, if you can find a mentor who can kind of help and show you the ways along, or at least who challenge you and support you at the same time, in whatever ways they're capable of doing that. Then that's certainly like a part of the journeyman aspect of your early career, is to find those institutions. And the Hugo House was important for me for that. And that it's like the central writing community, or one of the central writing institutions in Seattle. Mm-hmm. There are a couple of them like that. I think they're like in San Francisco. There's the Loft in the Minneapolis, St. Paul area. Grub Street in Boston. The Center for Fiction in New York. Those are places where young writers can go, and they can, depending on your level, like they have everything for what I call introductory workshops for people who are hobbyists, people who, like they have a day job, but they've always had a hankering to write a short story, and maybe it's for my grandkids, or, like whatever. If there's something at the Hugo House that will fit that person's need, but there's also something for folks like me who might be a year or two out of a master's program, but hey, I've been thinking about point of view, and what can I do to challenge point of view in writing, narrative fiction. They get wonderful writers who come through and do guest lectures and workshops and things like that. I've worked with Mary Gateskill. I've worked with Steve Almond. I've worked with Sam Lipsyte. I've worked with tons of folks who just come through, even for just a day. And if all they have to do is just to talk about something that they've given a lot of time and thought to in their own writing, that's time well spent. Yeah. I love doing that. I'm very grateful to the Hugo House for being a place where I could do that here. But I think at a certain point in time, I'd sort of met most of the writers within my milieu, and I felt that I tried some writing groups with them where we would get together and share some work, and I never really felt like I was getting quite what I wanted or needed. And then about the same time that I met Jim Shepard, who I consider to be like the greatest of my professional mentors, and just a very generous man, I decided to apply to Breadloaf, which is a venerated old writing conference, particularly if you go on the work study scholarship. And I had a slim shot, but I was like, we'll give it a shot. And I sent Havoc, the version or the draft that it was in at that time, as my application, and somehow I got it. One of 25 writers, both fiction writers and poets. It's kind of like a half-half split, with a couple of nonfiction writers, 2 or 3. One of them whom is a guy named Francisco Cantu, who has got his book out now called The Line Becomes a River, which is a wonderful book. We were all waiters together 2 summers ago, and that felt like it was bringing me out of the local scene into like a national scene. The poet A.R. Amons said that everything he knew of the American literary landscape came from his 2 weeks at Breadloaf when he was a fellow back in like 1950 whatever. It's been around since the 20s. Frost established it. Everybody you can think of has been through there. Richard Wright read from Native Son in the Little Theater where I work now. Last summer I worked there. I will go back this summer to work there. Maya Angelou, Toni Morrison, Tim O'Brien, everyone. Name a writer that you admire in the last 50 years. They've come up through Breadloaf in one way, shape, form, or fashion. And I don't know, just being a part of that place, it's not necessarily the workshops themselves. I've been in 2 workshops now, including with the great Charles Baxter, who is something of a master of the short story form, a formidable writer, critic, thinker, teacher. And that was a great workshop. And I did learn something incredibly valuable from him because I'd kind of gone in with the way I sort of learned to approach work that I'd learned from Jim. And it was nice to see how Charles could sort of take and put pressure on that and allow me to step back a little bit further and do even more work with it. So I'm not saying that was that the workshops are the less valuable part of it, but they are the less valuable part of it. The part of it is about being there with other writers, particularly at your stage, and you form these friendships. What I feel like are my first real friendships with writers. These are the folks who are now my readers, or the guys I was there with as a waiter. They are the ones I turn to and whose opinions I value when it comes to working out problems I have in my drafts. And a couple of them are kind of ahead of me in terms of the process of working with their agents, working with houses. So it's nice to have that resource to turn to and ask questions when the time comes.
Yeah.